We are back now with our political roundtable. The president of the AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka, the Republican governor of Mississippi, former RNC chairman Haley Barbour, chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Missouri Congressman Democrat Emanuel Cleaver, editorial board member and columnist for the Wall Street Journal, Kim Strassel, and the host of MSNBC's The Last Word, Lawrence O'Donnell, who spent a long time on Capitol Hill in the early 90s, including several years as the chief of staff to the Senate Finance Committee, so he's seen some of these fights before. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Trumka, welcome to the program. You heard Governor Walker. This is an important moment for unions and, as he says it, for taxpayers. How do you respond to what he says?
Well, first of all, this isn't about the budget crisis. Let's look at how his arguments migrated. First, he said the budget crisis was caused because workers were paid too much in Wisconsin. We now have studies that show they're not overpaid, they're underpaid. In fact, people with a degree in Wisconsin get 25% less than their private sector things. Then he said it was about the pension. Now we find out that his pension plan, unlike a lot in the country, is almost fully funded. The assets match the liabilities. And then the employees said, or the members out there said, his workers said, we'll accept your cuts. And he said, no, we won't accept. You're accepting our cuts. And the most outrageous thing that he did, and he talked about this, was he now saying to them, you either have to accept a loss of your rights or I'm going to lay you off. Now, no person should have to face the right of their loss of their job or the loss of their rights. I know Governor Barbour would never say to his employees, his people down there, you either have to give up your rights or you have to give up your job.
Let me follow on one point. A lot of people who are following this may be confused, but certainly have questions about the role of public sector unions. And there does something that seem to be distorted. You raise a lot of money from public employees. That goes to finance campaigns to try to get somebody in office that you can do business with. And ultimately, you're supporting someone, in some cases, that you're ultimately negotiating with. They also know that political employees, rather public employees, are politically active because they're organized by the unions. And so they make concessions on things like pensions, on health care, knowing that the promises don't come due till well down the road. Isn't this the cycle that we've gotten into that public unions have to take some responsibility for?
Well, public employees do take responsibility for it. And those governors that are willing to sit down and work with their employees can actually work out problems. We can solve them. But that's not what Governor Walker's doing. He's saying, I won't talk to you. I'll talk to all my big contributors. He talked to the Koch brothers, he thought, but I won't talk to employees. Look, the 5 countries or the 5 states in this country that prohibit collective bargaining by state employees have a collective debt right now of $222 billion. This isn't about employees. This is about the economy. So what we need to do is create jobs, and that's what we should be doing, working together.
Governor Barbour, this is the question that I posed at the beginning of the program. Is this an ideologue? Is this just about ideology? Is it about union busting? Or is it about really getting serious about shared sacrifice?
It's about budget. It is about the fact that Wisconsin, like many states, is broke. And the idea is, okay, let's make a very narrow agreement over wages and for 1 year is going to solve the problem. Governor Walker understands, as every governor understands, it is not enough just to kick the can down the road to next year because these problems snowball. They cascade. And that's why it's critical to get a hold of this. For most states,
But his argument is that the unions are so unreasonable, they won't ultimately make concessions. They've made the concession.
For a year, that's the whole problem. They've got to change the system. About half the states in the country don't allow or limit collective bargaining. The federal government doesn't have collective bargaining for wages, for health benefits. I mean, people act like this is some right. You know, that these are collective bargaining rights. There's no right to this under the Constitution.
Lawrence O'Donnell, how do you read this?
Well, you know, one of the things I was struck by in your interview with the governor, is, just to go back to a point, is that he said that he rejected the idea of sending in troublemakers to the demonstrations. That means the idea was discussed. That means someone in the governor's office said, how about we send some people in there to cause physical trouble in these demonstrations? And this governor thought about it, discussed it, rejected it. Okay, he rejected it, but to say he rejected it and think, well, that's the end of it, that's a non-controversial moment. It's quite shocking to think that there was a governor thinking about that.
You added the word physical. Nobody ever.
Okay,
you could talk about. Should you send people out there to talk to the employees?
Let's just say troublemakers. It's shocking to think the governor, among the things they were discussing, was should we send in troublemakers? How long would you have to discuss that?
Let me bring in Congressman Cleaver. You were on this program last month after the shooting of Gabby Giffords. We talked about tone. we talked about inappropriate public discourse. And I want to show you some of the placards that have been used by demonstrators, pro-union supporters out there. They have cast the governor, this one here, one dictator to go, one dictator down, talking about Hosni Mubarak. He has been compared to Hitler. We spend time on this program talking about the nonsense about Obama being a Muslim or not being born in America and asking Republicans if they reject that. Should that kind of discourse be rejected in this fight?
Absolutely. It's inappropriate. It should be condemned, not only by people close to the governor, but by those of us who are observers. I think that's something that we've got to squash in this country. We've come to a point in this government discussion where, you know, one side says anything goes to get my point across. And I think it would be certainly something that I would condemn. But it goes even further than that. We're not even involved in trying to solve the problems. One side proposes, the other side opposes. That's why we're not making progress. You know, the governor is saying here, you come back, let's prevent me laying off employees. When the lion and the lamb lie down, if you look closely, when the lion gets up, the lamb is missing. When the governor says, come back home, he's not saying let's negotiate. He's saying, come back home so I can do what I want to do to the unions.
Ken Strauss, I want to bring you in on this. And the president said this was an assault on unions. He's then gone quiet. Back in 2007, on the campaign trail, this is what he said, if this were to ever come to pass.
And understand this, if American workers are being denied their right to organize and collectively bargain when I'm in the White House, I'll put on a comfortable pair of shoes myself. I'll walk on that picket line with you as President of the United States of America. Because workers deserve to know that somebody's standing in their corner.
So here he said it was an assault on unions. In the past he said, I'll be out there walking with you. He's now gone silent. Meantime, he's trying to move to the center politically and try to create jobs. He's put himself in a difficult political situation here.
Well, as the governor says, he needs to have a pair of shoes on picketing around Washington, D.C. because federal workers are not allowed any of these collectively bargaining he's talking about there. Look, one of the problems here is that I think the problem for Democrats and unions in this is that it's not necessarily a winning issue here. What's going on in the states is a microcosm of the federal debate, and that is about fiscal responsibility right now. What these governors are saying, and it's Chris Christie in New Jersey, it's Scott Walker in Wisconsin, it's John Kasich in Ohio.
But they're not going this far on collective bargaining, not in New Jersey, not in Indiana.
Right, but we're talking about the bigger issue about budgets and how you deal with budgets. And you even have Democrats like Andrew Cuomo in New York saying, when you look at these budgets, huge ballooning areas of these budgets are due to public sector union benefits, and we cannot touch them because of collective bargaining, because of these things. We need the flexibilities and tools to fix this. And so that's an argument that resonates with Americans. People are talking about trying to cast this as the middle class, an assault on the middle class. It was middle-class taxpayers who elected these guys. They campaigned on it. They elected them.
Is President Obama doing enough? Is he satisfying you?
Look, it's important for the president, for middle-class voters to know that the president is on their side. Right. But this isn't about President Obama.
No, but I'm asking you whether he's doing enough. You heard what he said in 2007. He'd be out there with you.
David,
he's not out there with you.
This is about a governor who's taken on nurses and EMTs.
But answer the question. I asked a very specific question. The president in 2007 as a candidate said, if this ever happened, I'd be with you.
I think he's doing it the right way. He's not taking on workers like Scott Walker is and trying to take away their ability to come together and negotiate a middle-class way of life. He stands for that.
Could he be doing more?
Everybody could be doing more.
Well, that's in this particular case. I mean, Lawrence, I want to go back to the politics here. It is very difficult for a president who wants to move to the center to, before the cannon, after it fired initially, he said it's an assault on unions. Then he's gone quiet, and now he's got unhappiness on the left and on the right, and he just wants to be more of a centrist guy right now.
It would be interesting to see what his choice would be if he was in a second term. This is someone who won Wisconsin. He has to win Wisconsin again. There is chaos there right now. Politically, he doesn't doesn't know how this is going to play 3 months from now. If a large majority or significant majority of Wisconsin likes the outcome, whatever it is, a few months from now, that's where the president wants to be going into his reelection.
And, talking about
that's why he's staying.
Well, and I want to talk about the politics more. Howard Fineman in the Huffington Post had an analysis about this and how, in many ways, this is about the GOP's attempts to win more governor seats around the country. He talks about the real political math in Wisconsin. What happened? Why did Republicans only get 12 this last go-around? Well, according to GOP strategist and Governor Haley Barbour of Mississippi, who chaired the RGA in 2010, the power and money of public employee unions was the reason. The GOP's strategic aim is simple enough. If they can abolish union collective bargaining rights, they can undermine the automatic payment of dues to the public employee union treasuries. Shrinking those treasuries and reducing the union structure and membership will make it harder for Democrats to communicate directly with workers.
There it is.
Now, that's what Howard said.
Right, that's what's important.
That's what Howard said. That's what Howard said.
Do you disagree with that?
This is a state issue in a state where they've got serious budget problems because payroll pensions are such a huge part of the budget. You got to deal with it, and you can't deal with it for 1 year.
It's a national movement, I thought.
Let's talk about, you ask about the president.
Yeah.
The president is one of the greatest politicians in the history of the United States, and he's quiet because he understands that most Americans know this has to be done.
Congressman, hold on, let me get Congressman.
Let's sue him for breach of promise and move on. I mean, that's, the reality is that the president needs to be in Washington dealing with a plethora of issues around the world, not the least of which is Libya. But I want to go back to something that you said actually twice, Governor, and that is, you said, this would be a 1-year agreement. The governor was just elected. He'll still be governor in a year. The agreements that we have were not made by Gaddafi. They were made by people who sat down in a room and worked out an agreement. And I think labor unions are saying, and public sector employees are saying, okay, maybe things have gotten out of balance. We'll reduce some things. The governor is saying, I don't care. I want to crush the union.
I want to get to a break. Richard Trumka, I want to ask you one thing again about the tone of the debate. You're one of the leading labor voices in the country. Do you condemn the hyperbole, the overstatements, comparisons to Hitler and dictators? You think that's wrong on the part of pro-union supporters?
We ought to be pro-anti-union. It doesn't matter.
It's inappropriate.
We should be sitting down trying to create jobs. And look, if you think that the argument that you're doing in Wisconsin is winning, as you said, Kim, the polls show that Wisconsin, a vast majority of the people think this governor has overreached. His popularity has gone down. They're saying to him, sit down and negotiate. Don't do what you've been doing. So he's losing. If that's the argument you're going to do this year or next year, it's a loser for
I don't know why you fear democracy so much. You're saying that this is a temporary agreement. It's a result of democracy in Wisconsin. Republicans won Wisconsin, and the Republicans ran on this, and now they're doing this. If the idea remains popular and if it has Democratic support in Wisconsin, meaning support of the democracy of Wisconsin, why would you worry about leaving this agreement out there and allowing collective bargaining so that Wisconsin can democratically express itself in the future as being in favor or opposed to more or less government spending on workers?
It is precisely because I do believe in democracy. We had an election in 2010, and Wisconsin voted for a Republican governor, a Republican senator, 2 Republican houses of the legislature. And they have determined this is the best way to go forward to get the budget of that state in effect, which they were elected to do. Look at Indiana. In Indiana, this was done 6 years ago by the governor. It has been very popular. Nobody put Mitch Daniels' picture with a crosshair over his face like they're doing in Wisconsin. If Sarah Palin did that, it would be the world coming to an end.
Quick point, and then I want to get to a break.
Actually, in fairness, I mean, Governor Daniels did get some blowback when he did this 6 years ago, and his approval ratings did go down. But the question is, what happens in the end? People want to see balanced budgets, and what's interesting is Governor Daniels is one of the few states, because he ended up with that flexibility in his budget to negotiate, has had been in the black for the past 5 or 6 years, even when other states have not.
All right, let me get a break in here. I want to talk a little bit about the budget woes here in Washington, as well as what's going on in the Middle East right after this.